The starlight gleamed off the hull of the United Galactic Federation flagship as it drifted through the uncharted sector. Admiral Jack stood on the bridge, his scaled hands clasped behind his back as he gazed at the main view screen. What they had found was impossible. "Confirm scans," he ordered, his dual-tone voice echoing across the silent bridge. Officer Trell tapped at her console. "Confirmed, Admiral. We are detecting over 200 vessels of unknown design. They appear to be powered down but intact." Jack's secondary eyelids flickered in surprise. 200 ships, an entire fleet, just waiting in the darkness between stars. "Move us closer. Deploy scanning drones." The Federation ship edged forward, its advanced engines barely making a whisper as it approached the first of the ancient vessels. The mysterious ship was angular and practical, lacking the organic curves that characterize modern ship design. Its hull was dark gray with faded markings along the sides. "It's old," said Commander Penn, the science officer. "Initial dating suggests these vessels are at least 10,000 standard years old, before any known spacefaring civilization." Jack tilted his head. "That's not possible." "The evidence is clear, Admiral," Penn insisted, gesturing to the data flowing across his screen. "These ships predate the Axoni Empire. They even predate the First Contact Wars." The bridge crew exchanged glances. Everyone knew galactic history began with the Axoni, the first species to achieve faster-than-light travel. "What kind of weapons do they carry?" Jack asked. Officer Trell studied her readings. "Primitive. I'm detecting what appear to be projectile launchers and some form of energy weapon, but nothing that could penetrate modern shields. Their propulsion system uses an outdated fusion design." Jack moved closer to the view screen, studying the derelict fleet with growing curiosity. "Who built them? And why abandon them here?" "Unknown, sir," Penn replied. "But I'm detecting something interesting. The ships appear to be arranged in a defensive formation, almost as if they were waiting for something." The Federation ship continued its survey, passing vessel after vessel. Some were small and agile-looking, while others were massive structures that dwarfed even the Federation flagship. All bore the same weathered appearance, the same mysterious markings. "Sir," called Trell suddenly, "I've identified what appears to be the command vessel. It's at the center of the formation." "Take us there," Jack ordered. As they approached the central ship, the entire bridge crew fell silent. It was enormous, at least 3 times the size of their own vessel. Despite its age, there was something intimidating about its design. Functional, powerful, built for a purpose. "Prepare a boarding team," Jack said. "I want to know what's inside these relics." 6 hours later, the first reports came back. The boarding team had found their way inside the command ship, discovering corridors filled with strange technology and control rooms with chairs that seemed designed for bodies different from any known species. "The symbols are unlike anything in our database," reported Officer Vox, transmitting images back to the ship. "And the technology. Some of it seems almost primitive, but other systems use principles we don't recognize." Jack frowned at the images. "Keep searching. There must be some clue about who built these ships." By the end of the standard day, the news had spread throughout the Federation fleet. They had discovered an ancient armada, built by an unknown race that had somehow achieved spaceflight millennia before the established historical record. Some officers joked about the primitive design, calling the vessels space coffins or museum pieces. But Admiral Jack couldn't shake a feeling of unease as he stared at the massive fleet surrounding his ship. Whatever civilization had built these vessels had commanded power on a scale that was difficult to imagine, and something had caused them to abandon their fleet, leaving it to drift through the emptiness of space for 10,000 years. The Federation Council chamber hummed with excited voices. Projected in the center of the grand circular room was a hologram of the ancient fleet, rotating slowly for all to see. Representatives from 50 different species leaned forward in their seats, each trying to get a better look at the discovery that had the entire galactic community buzzing. High Commander Dorn stepped onto the speaking platform, his tall frame and bright red skin marking him as one of the dominant Krell species. The room fell silent. "Esteemed council members," he began, his voice deep and commanding. "Our exploratory fleet has made a fascinating archaeological discovery. An ancient collection of spacecraft dating back approximately 10,000 standard years." Murmurs spread through the chamber as the hologram zoomed in on one of the larger vessels. "Our scientists confirmed these ships predate all known spacefaring civilizations," Dorn continued, "including our own Krell ancestors and even the Axoni." A blue-skinned representative stood up. "What about weapons capabilities? Do these vessels pose any threat?" Commander Dorn laughed, and many council members joined in. "Threat? These relics couldn't pose a threat to a cargo hauler, let alone our modern battle cruisers. Their weapons are primitive projectile launchers and basic energy beams. Our shields would easily repel such attacks." The laughter grew louder. The idea that anyone would fear these ancient ships seemed absurd to the gathered representatives. "I recommend we establish a salvage operation," Dorn said once the laughter died down. "These vessels contain considerable amounts of rare metals, and perhaps study of their design might provide some historical curiosity." In the back of the chamber, Professor Tom Miller shifted uncomfortably in his seat. As one of the few human representatives on the council, he was used to being overlooked. Humans were relatively new to the galactic stage, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 200 years ago. Most species viewed them as the newcomers, the youngsters of the cosmic community. Miller stood up, raising his hand for attention. The room quieted, more out of surprise than respect. "With all due respect, High Commander," Miller said, his voice steady despite the stares, "I believe we should approach these vessels with more caution. We don't know who built them or why they were abandoned. There could be valuable historical information." "Professor Miller," interrupted Dorn with a dismissive wave, "while we appreciate the human perspective on this matter, these ships are clearly remnants of a failed civilization, one that didn't survive long enough to make any meaningful impact on galactic history." Several representatives chuckled. "The markings on the ships," Miller persisted, "they contain elements that resemble early human writing systems. I think." This time, the laughter was louder. "Are you suggesting, Professor, that humans built these ships?" asked a reptilian counselor, barely containing his amusement, "when your species was still figuring out basic agriculture?" Miller's face reddened. "I'm suggesting we should investigate thoroughly before deciding to dismantle them for scrap." High Commander Dorn smiled, showing his pointed teeth. "Your enthusiasm for history is commendable, Professor, but these ships are primitive curiosities, nothing more. The Council will vote now on the salvage operation." The vote was quick and overwhelming. 87 in favor of salvage, 3 opposed. Miller watched helplessly as the Council moved on to other matters. The fate of the ancient fleet decided in less than an hour. After the meeting, Miller stood alone in the viewing gallery, looking out at the stars. A tall figure approached, Officer Wilson, another human who worked in the Federation's engineering corps. "I heard what happened in the council meeting," Wilson said quietly. Miller nodded. "They won't listen. They think humans are too young, too inexperienced to have valuable input." Wilson glanced around to ensure they were alone. "I've been assigned to the salvage team. Some of the markings on those ships, they don't just resemble human writing. They are human writing." Miller's eyes widened. "Are you certain? Not just writing?" Wilson continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Some of the design elements, the engineering principles, they're from Earth, old Earth." A chill ran down Miller's spine as he looked back at the stars. "If you're right, the Federation has no idea what they're about to wake up." The massive salvage vessel Opportunity hovered beside the ancient command ship, its cutting beams ready to slice through the hull. 20 smaller craft surrounded it, each filled with engineers and salvage crews eager to strip the derelict fleet of valuable materials. Officer Wilson stood in the airlock chamber, checking his environment suit one last time. As the only human assigned to the primary salvage team, he felt a growing sense of unease. The symbols he had spotted earlier matched old Earth naval designations, too perfectly to be coincidence. "Final checks complete," announced the team leader, a six-limbed Jaxian named Torque. "Remember the protocol. Cut only along the marked lines. Anything interesting goes in containment for the science division." The airlock cycled, and the team of 12 floated toward the ancient vessel. Wilson followed behind, his heart pounding. Up close, the massive ship was even more impressive. Despite its age, the hull showed remarkably little damage from space debris or radiation. Torque positioned the cutting team at a section near what appeared to be a side entrance. "Begin here. Standard 3-meter insertion point." The lead engineer activated his plasma cutter, and a brilliant blue beam struck the dark hull. Sparks flew as the cutter began to slice through the ancient metal. Wilson watched nervously. "Maybe we should try to find an actual entrance point first," he suggested. "These ships might have security systems." Torque laughed. "Security systems? After 10,000 years? Be serious, Wilson." The cutting continued for several minutes, the beam slowly carving a rectangular entrance into the hull. Wilson noticed something strange. The metal wasn't melting as expected. Instead, it seemed to be absorbing the energy. "Something's wrong," he said. "The cutter should have broken through by now." Before Torque could respond, a low hum emanated from the ship. The sound grew louder, vibrating through their suits. Wilson felt the hairs on his arms stand up. "Stop cutting. Stop now," he shouted. Too late. A series of lights flickered to life along the hull, running in sequences that Wilson recognized immediately. Power-up protocols, just like in the old Earth naval manuals he had studied in the academy. "Everyone back to the ship," Torque ordered, finally sensing danger. The salvage team pushed away from the ancient vessel, but Wilson remained frozen in place, watching as more systems activated across the massive ship. In the distance, other vessels in the fleet were lighting up as well, a cascading wave of awakening power. Inside his helmet, Wilson's communicator crackled to life, but it wasn't Torque or any of the salvage team. Instead, a mechanical voice spoke in perfect, if oddly accented, standard English. "Hull breach detected. Defensive systems activated. Scanning hostile entities." Wilson's blood ran cold. He knew exactly what was happening. "This is Officer James Wilson of Earth. These are not hostile forces." "Repeat, not hostile." The voice paused, then continued. "Earth origin detected. Authorization codes required for system override." Wilson frantically searched his memory for anything that might help. His grandfather had been a military historian, obsessed with Earth's forgotten first age of space. He had told James stories about emergency protocols. "U&D of Emergency Protocol Alpha 77, Wilson said, praying the half-remembered code would work. "Stand down defensive systems." Another pause. "Partial recognition. Secondary authorization required. Initiating defensive countermeasures against non-identified vessels." Throughout the fleet, weapon systems hummed to life. Ancient gun ports opened, revealing weaponry unlike anything the Federation had ever seen. Not the primitive projectile weapons they had detected, but something far more sophisticated. The Opportunity's captain's voice blared over the general channel. "All teams, return immediately. Those ships are powering up weapons." Wilson watched in horror as the first salvage vessel tried to pull away. A beam of intense blue-white light shot from the ancient ship, slicing through the modern vessel's shields as if they weren't there. The salvage ship spun away, its engine section completely severed. "All Federation vessels, this is Officer Wilson." He shouted into his comm. "Withdraw immediately. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage these vessels." As the Federation ships scrambled to retreat, Wilson floated before the awakening giant, watching as 10,000 years of dormancy came to an end. The ancient fleet, humanity's forgotten legacy, had awakened, and the galaxy was about to discover just how advanced humans had once been. Alarms blared throughout the Federation command ship as damaged vessels limped back to the safety of the fleet. Admiral Jack stood rigid on the bridge, watching the disaster unfold on the main screen. 3 salvage ships destroyed, 5 heavily damaged, and dozens of crew members missing. How is this possible? He demanded, slamming his fist on the console. Those weapons should not have penetrated our shields. The tactical officer shook his head in disbelief. Sir, they're using some kind of energy weapon we've never encountered before. It doesn't seem to interact with our shield harmonics at all. It just passes right through them. On the screen, the ancient fleet had arranged itself into a perfect defensive formation. The ships moved with surprising speed and precision for vessels so old. Their dark hulls now glowed with lines of blue energy, weapons ports open and ready. "Where is Officer Wilson?" Jack asked, scanning the bridge. "Still out there, sir," replied Commander Penn. His last transmission indicated he was trying to communicate with the ships. The communications officer suddenly straightened. "Sir, I'm receiving a transmission from Wilson." "Put him through," Jack ordered. Wilson's face appeared on the screen. He was still in his environment suit, floating in space with a massive command ship looming behind him. "Admiral, you need to cease all hostile actions immediately," Wilson said, his voice tense. "These ships are of human origin." A stunned silence fell over the bridge. "That's impossible," Jack finally said. "These vessels are 10,000 years old. Human civilization wasn't capable of spaceflight then." "That's what our history says," Wilson replied. "But I've made contact with the ship's defensive AI. These vessels were built during what they call the first age of humanity, before some great collapse. The AI recognizes me as human, which is why I'm still alive." Jack's second eyelids flickered rapidly as he processed this information. What are their intentions? Currently, they see the Federation as hostile forces attempting to dismantle them. The AI calls itself Guardian, and it was programmed to protect something. I'm not sure what yet, but I can tell you their weapons technology is far beyond our current understanding. As if to emphasize Wilson's point, another salvage vessel that had strayed too close was struck by a glancing beam. Its entire shield grid failed instantly, and the ship spun away, powerless. "Sir," the science officer interrupted, "Professor Miller is requesting permission to join this communication." "Put him through," Jack ordered. Professor Miller's face appeared alongside Wilson's on the screen. "Admiral, I've been researching human historical records since our discovery of the fleet. There are myths, stories we thought were legends, about a time when humans traveled among the stars, before the great darkness forced them back to Earth." "Myths are not evidence, Professor," Jack said impatiently. "The evidence is firing at your ships." "Admiral," Miller replied sharply, "I believe these vessels are from the lost defense fleet mentioned in our oldest texts. They were sent out as a last line of protection against some ancient enemy." Admiral Jack paced the bridge, considering his options. The Federation Council had dismissed these ships as harmless relics, but now they had destroyed or disabled 8 modern vessels without taking any damage themselves. "What do you suggest?" he finally asked. "Let me approach them with Wilson," Miller said. "I've been studying the old texts. I might know some command codes that could help us communicate properly." Jack looked back at the screen, where the ancient fleet waited in perfect formation. Their weapons remained powered, ready to fire at any approaching vessel. "You have 1 hour," Jack decided. "After that, I'm calling in battle cruisers from the nearest Federation outpost." As Wilson and Miller prepared to approach the ancient command ship together, a message flashed across all Federation channels. The mechanical voice was clear and ominous. "Attention unidentified vessels. You have violated secure space and attempted deconstruction of UNDF property. Further hostile action will result in escalation of defensive measures. This is your final warning." The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. Whatever these ships were, Whatever ancient human civilization had built them, one thing was becoming increasingly clear. They had gravely underestimated what they were dealing with. Professor Miller floated beside Officer Wilson in the small shuttle, approaching the massive command ship of the ancient fleet. The vessel's dark hull loomed before them, its surface now alive with pulsing blue lines of energy. Weapon ports remained open, tracking their approach. Broadcasting on all frequencies, Wilson said, his fingers dancing across the shuttle's communication panel. "This is Officer James Wilson and Professor Thomas Miller of Earth. We come peacefully to establish communication." The shuttle drifted closer, its engines powered down to appear non-threatening. Miller clutched an old data pad containing notes from his historical research, fragments of ancient codes and protocols he had discovered in humanity's oldest archives. "Do you really think this will work?" Wilson asked quietly. Miller nodded, though uncertainty showed in his eyes. "These ships must respond to human authority. If they were built by our ancestors, they should recognize proper command sequences." A scanning beam suddenly washed over their shuttle, bathing the cockpit in blue light. Both men tensed as the massive ship seemed to study them. "Biological scan complete," announced the same mechanical voice they had heard earlier. "2 human subjects identified. Approach authorized to Docking Bay Alpha." A section of the hull slid open, revealing a cavernous hangar bay. Soft guidance lights illuminated a path for their shuttle. "It's recognizing us as human," Wilson whispered, awe in his voice as he guided their shuttle forward. Once inside, the hangar doors closed behind them with a deep, resonating thud. The shuttle settled onto the deck with a gentle bump. Gravity normalized around them, perfect Earth standard gravity. "It was built for humans," Miller said, checking his suit's readings. "The atmosphere is even being adjusted to Earth normal. These systems have been dormant for millennia, yet they function perfectly." They exited the shuttle cautiously. The hangar bay was enormous, with spaces for dozens of smaller craft. Most were empty, but a few ancient shuttles remained, their designs sleek and advanced despite their age. "Welcome, human representatives," the ship's AI spoke through their suit communicators. "This is Gardian, Defense Systems Coordinator of the United Nations Defense Fleet Sentinel Division. Please proceed to Command Center for authentication and briefing." They followed illuminated pathways through the ship. Wilson marveled at the technology around them. Despite being thousands of years old, much of it appeared more advanced than current Federation standards. The corridors were designed for human proportions, with markings in an ancient form of Earth script. "Look at this," Miller said, stopping at a wall display. "These are star charts, but the configurations, these are from over 10,000 years ago." Wilson studied the charts. The positions of these systems would match stellar drift calculations from that time period. "This confirms it. These ships really are 10,000 years old." The command center doors slid open as they approached. Inside was a circular room with control stations surrounding a central holographic display. As they entered, the hologram activated, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with certain regions highlighted. "Human representatives." Guardian's voice echoed through the room. "Preliminary genetic verification confirms Earth origin. Secondary authentication required before full historical briefing." Miller stepped forward, consulting his notes. "Guardian, initiate historical recognition protocol. Authorization. From the ashes of the old world, we build the stars of the new." A moment of silence followed. Then the holographic display shifted, zooming in on Earth. "Authentication accepted, Professor Miller. Welcome to the Sentinel Fleet, humanity's final defense line." The hologram expanded, showing hundreds of worlds across the galaxy, all marked with human settlement indicators. During the first age of space, humans established colonies on 342 worlds across this galactic sector, Guardian explained. The Sentinel fleet was constructed as a hidden safeguard against extinction. Wilson and Miller stared in disbelief at the extent of the ancient human empire, larger than the current Federation itself. "What happened?" Miller asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The Great Collapse, Guardian replied. A catastrophic war with an advanced enemy forced humanity back to Earth. Most colonies were destroyed. Earth itself was bombed into a pre-industrial state. The Sentinel fleet was ordered to hide and wait for proper reactivation codes, which never came, until now. As the full history unfolded before them, Miller and Wilson realized the magnitude of their discovery. Humanity hadn't been a newcomer to the galactic stage. They had been one of its first and greatest powers, only to fall so completely that even their own descendants have forgotten their legacy. And now, that legacy had awakened. The holographic display in the command center shifted, showing the Federation fleet holding position at a safe distance. Admiral Jack's face appeared in a communication window, his expression tense. "Professor Miller, Officer Wilson, report your status," he demanded. "The ancient vessels have powered down their weapons but remain in defensive formation." Miller stepped forward. "Admiral, we've made contact with the fleet's AI system, called Guardian. The situation is, well, it's extraordinary. These ships were indeed built by humans, over 10,000 years ago." Jack's expression shifted from concern to disbelief. "That's impossible. Human civilization couldn't have." "With respect, Admiral," Wilson interrupted, "the evidence is all around us. This technology, these ships, they're human in origin. From a time before what Guardian calls the Great Collapse." Miller gestured to the holographic display, which Guardian had adjusted to share with the Federation ship. "We've been granted access to the historical records. Humans once controlled hundreds of worlds across this sector of the galaxy. This fleet was their last defense measure." The bridge of the Federation ship fell silent as the officers processed this information. The tactical officer leaned toward Admiral Jack, whispering something. Jack nodded and turned back to the screen. "Our sensors detect massive energy readings from those vessels," Jack said carefully. "Power signatures unlike anything in our database. If humans built these ships, why doesn't Earth possess such technology today?" Guardian's voice answered before Miller could respond. "The Great Collapse resulted in complete technological regression on Earth. Human civilization was bombed back to pre-industrial levels by the enemy. Recovery took thousands of years, with much knowledge lost." "What enemy?" Jack asked. "Who could have defeated a civilization capable of building these ships?" The holographic display changed again, showing sleek, organic-looking vessels with devastating weapon systems. "The Orcs," Guardian replied. "A hostile species from beyond the galactic rim. They sought to harvest all life-bearing worlds in this sector." Miller studied the images with growing concern. "Guardian, were the Orcs defeated?" "Unknown," the AI responded. "The final directive from Earth Command was to hide the Sentinel fleet until properly reactivated by authenticated human operators. No further communications were received. The fleet has remained dormant for 10,243 standard years." Wilson walked around the holographic display, examining the alien ships. "These Orcs, are they still a threat?" Last intelligence indicated withdrawal to their home region after sustaining heavy losses from the Sentinel fleet's final stand. Guardian said, "Their current status is unknown." Admiral Jack cleared his throat. "Professor Miller, Officer Wilson, I need you to return to the Federation ship immediately. The Council must be informed of these developments." Miller shook his head. "Admiral, I believe we should stay here. Guardian has recognized us as authorized human operators. We need to properly secure the fleet before I can leave." "That's not a request, Professor," Jack said, his tone hardening. "The discovery of advanced weapons technology from an ancient human empire has serious implications for galactic security. The Council will want direct testimony." Wilson stepped forward. "Sir, with respect, I believe the protocols here are clear. These ships were built by humanity, and they've accepted human authority. They're our responsibility." A new voice joined the conversation, the Federation Council representative, appearing on a separate communication window. His scaled face showed clear alarm. This fleet must be placed under Federation control immediately, the counselor declared. If what you say is true, such technology cannot remain solely in human hands. Miller exchanged a glance with Wilson. Guardian had been monitoring the exchange silently. Guardian, Miller asked quietly, what are your primary directives regarding chain of command? The Sentinel fleet recognizes only Earth Central Command or properly authenticated human operators as command authorities. Guardian responded. No external political entity may assume control of UNDF assets without proper authentication. The counselor's face darkened. This is unacceptable. The Federation Council will not allow. The Federation Council, Miller said with newfound confidence, is welcome to open diplomatic relations with Earth regarding the Sentinel fleet. But these ships were built by humans, for humans. They are our heritage and our responsibility. As if to emphasize his point, Guardian activated a series of displays around the command center, showing the full capabilities of the ancient fleet. Weapon systems, faster-than-light drive technology, defense grids, all far beyond current Federation standards. The message was clear. Humanity's forgotten past had returned, and the balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted dramatically. 3 weeks after the discovery, the Grand Council chamber of the Federation was filled to capacity. Representatives from all 50 member species sat in tense silence as Admiral Jack finished his report on the ancient fleet. In conclusion, he said, his voice echoing through the chamber, we have confirmed that the vessels are indeed of human origin, dating back approximately 10,000 years. The technology they contain is significantly advanced beyond our current capabilities. High Commander Dorn shifted uncomfortably in his seat at the head of the council. The red-skinned Krell who had once laughed at the primitive fleet now looked considerably less confident. And the weapons demonstrations? Asked a representative from the back. Admiral Jack nodded grimly. The Sentinel fleet, as it's called, allowed us to observe a small fraction of its defensive capabilities. A single ship from the fleet disabled one of our battle cruisers in less than 10 seconds. Shields were ineffective. Weapons had no impact. Murmurs filled the chamber. Many representatives looked toward the human section, where Professor Miller sat calmly beside the newly arrived Earth ambassadors. The question before this council, Dorn said, trying to maintain control of the meeting, is what happens now. These vessels represent a significant shift in the balance of power within Federation space. Ambassador Taylor, the lead representative from Earth, stood. Unlike Miller, who had been a minor figure in the council, Taylor carried himself with new confidence. Behind him stood Officer Wilson, now promoted to captain and appointed as liaison to the Sentinel fleet. The position of Earth is simple, Taylor said. The Sentinel fleet is human technology, built by our ancestors, and rightfully belongs to humanity. We have no hostile intentions toward the Federation or its members. Easy to say when you suddenly command the most powerful fleet in the quadrant, muttered a representative, loud enough to be heard. Taylor smiled. If we had hostile intentions, this meeting would be very different. The Sentinel fleet contains 247 capital ships with weapons that could reduce this station to atoms in minutes. Yet here we are, talking peacefully. The chamber fell silent again. We propose a new arrangement, Taylor continued. Earth will maintain control of the Sentinel fleet, but we offer defensive pacts to all Federation members. In return, we ask for full membership status and a seat on the High Council. Dorn leaned forward. Humans have been members for nearly 2 centuries. You already have representation. As a minor species, Taylor countered, with limited voting rights and no council seat. That arrangement reflected our perceived status as newcomers to interstellar travel. We now know that was inaccurate. Guardian had provided access to ancient Earth's historical archives. Displays around the chamber showed images of the first age of space, massive human cities on distant worlds, great scientific achievements, and exploration vessels pushing out to the stars. Our ancestors built an empire that spanned hundreds of worlds, Taylor said, gesturing to the images. then faced an enemy so devastating that Earth itself was bombed back to the Stone Age. Our history was lost, our achievements forgotten. We had to rebuild from nothing. Miller stood and joined Taylor. The Voraks nearly wiped us out completely. The Sentinel fleet was our last defense, programmed to hide until humanity recovered enough to reclaim it. A holographic projection appeared in the center of the chamber, a massive map of the galaxy with ancient human territories highlighted. Many council members gasped as they realized the extent of the old human empire. Several Federation worlds had once been human colonies abandoned during the Great Collapse. "We don't seek to reclaim these territories," Taylor assured them. "That history is past. But we do seek recognition of our true place in galactic history, not as newcomers, but as returnees." High Commander Dorn looked around the chamber, seeing the changing expressions on the faces of the representatives. The mockery and dismissal that had once greeted humans was gone, replaced by new respect, and perhaps a touch of fear. "The Council will recess to consider Earth's proposal," Dorn announced. "We will reconvene tomorrow." As the representatives filed out, many approached the human delegation with new overtures of friendship and alliance. The political landscape had shifted overnight. Captain Wilson stood beside the Earth ambassador, watching the proceedings with a sense of wonder. Just weeks ago, he had been a junior officer, ignored and overlooked. Now he commanded humanity's rediscovered legacy. "They're not laughing anymore," Miller said quietly, coming to stand beside him. Wilson nodded. "No, but neither are we seeking revenge for their dismissal. That's the difference between power and wisdom." Above the station, visible through the grand viewport, the first ship of the Sentinel fleet hovered in silent testament to humanity's forgotten greatness and its promising future.